She was dying of thirst in the desert, until a man changed her fate. Every step Amina took felt heavier than the last, her feet sinking slightly with each movement, and the dry wind scratched her skin like tiny invisible needles. She had been walking for hours, maybe days she could no longer remember, and the desert seemed endless, stretching endlessly in every direction. Her lips were cracked and raw, her tongue sticking to the roof of her mouth, begging for water she no longer had. Amina's mind was a whirl of thoughts and fear. How had she ended up here, alone in this vast, merciless desert? She had left her small village with hope in her heart, thinking that the journey would lead her to a better life, a place where she could find work and security. But the desert had other plans. Each grain of sand seemed to mock her, and the sky, so bright and unforgiving, offered no comfort. Her throat burned unbearably, her chest tightened, and she could feel the dizziness creeping in. She tried to take deep breaths, but each inhale felt hot and dry, scraping her lungs. Her eyes blurred as she scanned the horizon, desperately looking for any sign of water or shelter. In the distance, she thought she saw a mirage, what looked like a shimmering oasis, but as she stumbled toward it, it dissolved into the same barren sands. She sank to her knees, the heat pressing down on her like a weight she could not lift. Tears mixed with the dust on her face. Amina felt an ache that went deeper than thirst or exhaustion. It was a deep loneliness, a fear that no one would come for her, that she would fade away in this endless desert without anyone knowing her fate. Memories of her family, of her mother's gentle voice and her father's strong hands, filled her mind. She thought of her little brother, smiling as he played near their home. She had left them with promises of return, promises she feared she might never keep. Every sound was magnified in the quiet of the desert, the crunch of sand beneath her hands, the distant whistle of wind, the occasional cry of a bird somewhere far away. Her body shook as she tried to push herself up. She forced her legs to move, but every step was agony. The sun's heat had burned the moisture from her skin, leaving it tight and raw. She thought of collapsing, of lying down and letting the desert take her. But something inside her, a small spark of stubbornness, refused to give up completely. Amina remembered the advice her mother had given her before she left home. "Always believe you will find a way," her mother had said, "even when everything seems lost." She clung to that thought like a lifeline. With trembling hands, she dug her fingers into the sand and forced herself forward. Her lips whispered a quiet prayer, not necessarily to a god, but to anything that could hear her cries. "Please help me. Just a little water, just a little shade." Hours passed, or maybe it was only minutes. Time had lost its meaning. Her legs felt like they were made of lead, and her head spun with every step. She stumbled over a small dune and fell onto her face, sand filling her mouth and sticking to the sweat on her skin. She coughed violently, gagging on the grains, but forced herself to rise again. Her body ached from the relentless sun, but she refused to stay down. Somewhere in the distance, the sun began its slow descent, casting long, sharp shadows across the sand. The desert, even in the evening, offered little relief. The wind still carried its scorching touch, and the chill of the approaching night was yet to come. Amina's mind wandered as she walked, drifting to thoughts of home and life before this journey. She remembered the laughter of friends, the aroma of food her mother had cooked, the quiet moments by the river in her village. Each memory was both comforting and painful, reminding her of what she had lost and what she might never see again. She felt the weight of fear pressing down on her chest, threatening to crush her spirit, but she clung to hope like a lifeline. She whispered to herself over and over, "I can survive. I must survive. I will not give up." As the sun finally began to dip toward the horizon, the temperature dropped slightly, but the exhaustion in her body remained. She had nowhere to rest, no shade to protect her, and her energy was nearly gone. She considered lying down on the sand, just for a moment, but she knew that even a short pause could be dangerous. She had to keep moving, even if her legs threatened to collapse. A sudden gust of wind blew across the desert, lifting sand into the air and stinging her face. Amina shielded her eyes and coughed, struggling to stay on her feet. She tried to focus on a small hill in the distance, hoping it might lead her to some relief, a chance to see farther, maybe even spot water or someone who could help. She gritted her teeth and began climbing slowly, step by step, her hands pressing into the warm sand for support. As she reached the top of the hill, she paused, leaning heavily on her knees. Her vision was blurry, but for the first time in hours, she thought she saw a figure far away, a man walking steadily across the desert. At first, she thought it was another mirage, but as she squinted, she realized that he was real. Her heart leaped with a mixture of hope and caution. Could he be a traveler, a nomad, or just another person lost like her? Amina wanted to call out, but her voice was barely a whisper, cracked and hoarse from dehydration. She waved weakly, trying to get his attention. The man, as if sensing her distress, changed his course slightly and moved toward her. Relief flooded her exhausted body. She could not yet speak, but tears streamed down her cheeks as she watched him approach. For the first time since she had entered the desert, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, she would survive this ordeal. Her body trembled with exhaustion and fear, but the sight of the man gave her the strength to take a few more steps toward him. Each movement was agony, but she forced herself onward, driven by the simple, desperate need to survive. The desert, with all its harshness, had pushed her to the edge, but the presence of another human being reminded her that help could exist even in the most unlikely places. As the man came closer, Amina could see that he carried a small water container, and his expression was calm but kind. He did not rush or judge her. Instead, he extended a hand toward her, silently offering help. She stumbled forward and collapsed into his support, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. The relief was overwhelming, warmth and safety in a place that had offered none. The desert's cruelty had not ended, but the presence of this stranger, this man, had changed something within her. Amina closed her eyes, letting herself rest against him for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The heat of the sun, the harsh winds, the endless sand, they all remained, but for the first time she felt a glimmer of hope. She had survived the worst of the desert so far, and maybe, just maybe, she could make it through the rest. And as she felt the cool water touch her lips and the man's steady presence beside her, she realized that even in the most desolate places, humanity and kindness could appear like a beacon of light. Amina's body trembled as she leaned against the stranger, the cool water dripping slowly from the container into her parched throat. Each sip felt like a small miracle, washing away the burning thirst that had tormented her for hours. She closed her eyes, letting herself rest, feeling both the weight of exhaustion and the tiny spark of hope igniting in her chest. The man did not rush her. He waited patiently, watching her with a calm, gentle expression that somehow made her feel safe, even in this vast, dangerous desert. Finally, when her lips no longer felt raw and her mind a little clearer, she lifted her head and looked at him. He was not a young man, nor an old one, just the right age to have seen enough of life to carry wisdom in his eyes. His clothes were simple, practical for traveling the desert, and a wide scarf wrapped around his head, shielding him from the burning sun. Despite the harsh surroundings, he exuded a quiet strength that made Amina believe she could survive this journey with him by her side. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. The words felt strange on her tongue, as if she were speaking for the first time in days. The man nodded. "You need to rest more before moving," he said in a calm, measured voice. "The desert is not kind to those who rush." His accent was soft, unfamiliar, but comforting. He extended his hand again, not to pull her up, but to steady her as she took tentative steps. Amina's legs shook, threatening to give way under her own weight, but the presence of this stranger gave her strength she didn't know she still had. They walked slowly at first, the sand soft beneath their feet, leaving small, temporary footprints behind. Each step was a battle for Amina, but she forced herself forward, feeling the cool water inside her start to revive her energy, even if only a little. The man walked beside her, silent at times, letting her catch her breath, and at other moments offering quiet guidance. "What's your name?" she asked after a while, her voice barely above a whisper. He paused, glancing at her with a faint smile. "Omar," he said. "And yours?" "Amina," she replied. Hearing her own name aloud felt strange, almost like she was reclaiming a piece of herself she had lost in the endless desert. Omar nodded, as if acknowledging the weight behind her name, and they continued walking. The desert stretched endlessly, the sun beginning to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The beauty of it was almost cruel, mocking Amina with its serenity while hiding the danger beneath. She shivered, realizing how close she had come to giving up entirely before meeting Omar. As the hours passed, she began to notice the small details around her, the pattern of the sand dunes, the distant shadows of hills, and the occasional tuft of dry desert grass. Each sight reminded her that she was still alive, that she had survived the worst of her thirst, and that she could still move forward. Omar seemed to know the desert intimately, guiding them along small ridges and hidden paths that made the journey easier than if she were alone. "Why are you helping me?" she asked after a while, curiosity and caution mingling in her voice. Omar glanced at her, his eyes thoughtful. "Because no one deserves to die alone in this desert," he replied simply. "And because sometimes helping others is the only way to survive ourselves." Amina considered his words. She had met strangers before, people who only thought of themselves, but Omar was different. There was no judgment, no expectation, just help. She felt a flicker of trust, fragile but growing. Night began to fall, and the desert temperature dropped sharply. The scorching heat gave way to a biting chill that penetrated through their clothes. Omar led Amina to a small dip between dunes, a natural shelter from the wind. He helped her sit down and adjusted a piece of cloth to cover her shoulders, offering warmth as much as protection. She shivered, not just from cold but from the relief of having someone care for her after hours of solitude and fear. Omar unpacked a small, simple meal from his bag, some dried fruits and bread. Amina accepted it gratefully, her stomach aching from hunger. Each bite seemed to restore her strength, and with each passing moment she felt a little more like herself. She realized how much she had been surviving only on hope and sheer willpower, and how much she had depended on luck to see another day. But now, with Omar's help, survival seemed possible. As they ate, Omar spoke quietly about life in the desert, about how he had learned to read the wind and follow the stars to find water or shelter. His stories were calm and steady, and they seemed to remind Amina that the desert, while harsh, was also a place of knowledge and skill, where life could continue if one understood it. She listened, fascinated, her mind temporarily distracted from the fear and pain she had endured. "You're lucky to have found me when you did," Omar said after a while. "Many don't make it this far without help." Amina looked at him, her eyes wide with gratitude. I thought I was going to die," she admitted softly. "I never imagined someone would find me or care enough to help." Omar shrugged slightly, as if it were no big deal. "We all need help sometimes," he said. "And sometimes fate brings the right people together at the right time." For the first time since she had entered the desert, Amina allowed herself to relax. She leaned back on the soft sand, letting exhaustion wash over her. Her body felt heavy, but the presence of Omar made her feel secure, like she could finally rest without fear. She closed her eyes, listening to the sound of the wind whispering through the dunes, and slowly drifted into a light sleep. The night passed quietly, the cold desert air pressing against them, but Omar kept watch. When Amina awoke, The first light of dawn was spreading across the horizon, painting the sand in soft shades of gold and pink. She felt a strange mixture of hope and apprehension. The desert was still vast, still dangerous, but with Omar by her side, the path forward seemed possible. They continued walking together, their steps slow but steady. Amina noticed how Omar moved with confidence, his eyes scanning the horizon constantly, aware of every shift in the wind and sand. She tried to mimic his calm, learning from his example, feeling a small sense of pride as her body grew stronger with each passing hour. Along the way, they encountered small challenges, a sudden gust of wind that threatened to push them off balance, patches of soft sand that sank underfoot, and the ever-present scorching sun. But Omar's guidance helped Amina navigate each obstacle. He offered advice on where to step, how to pace herself, and how to conserve energy. Slowly, she began to realize that survival in the desert was not just about endurance. It was about knowledge, skill, and trust in the people around you. By midday, they stopped at a small ridge to rest. Amina's body ached, but her spirit had changed. Where there had been despair and fear, there was now determination and cautious hope. She realized that meeting Omar had not only saved her life physically, but had also given her the emotional strength to continue. The desert was still harsh, but she was no longer alone. As they sat in the shade of the ridge, Omar spoke again, telling her about places further ahead where water could be found, where travelers sometimes rested, and where she could find safety. Amina listened intently, absorbing every word. Each piece of information was a lifeline, a map out of the endless sea of sand. She realized that trust, patience, and perseverance could transform even the most hopeless situation into one with a chance of survival. By the time the sun began its descent, they had covered a significant distance. Amina's steps were steadier, her energy returning, and her fear less overwhelming. She knew the desert was far from conquered, but the presence of someone who understood it made all the difference. She had survived the first night, learned to pace herself, and discovered the importance of guidance, kindness, and trust. As twilight painted the desert in muted shades of orange and purple, Amina felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. She looked at Omar, grateful for his presence, for his calm, and for the simple humanity that had appeared in the midst of a place that offered so little. She knew that the journey was far from over, but for the first time, she believed she could face the challenges ahead. And with that belief, she took another step forward, ready to walk alongside the man who had changed her fate. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting long shadows across the endless dunes. Amina stretched her stiff muscles, feeling the aches from the previous day, but also a quiet strength she hadn't felt in a long time. Her body was tired, but her spirit was slowly waking up with a sense of purpose. She looked over at Omar, who was already walking steadily, scanning the horizon as though he could read the desert like an open book. They moved together in silence for a while, each step deliberate, careful, and purposeful. The desert was not forgiving. The sand shifted underfoot, making every step a challenge, and the sun's heat was already strong, even in the early hours. Amina felt the sting of sweat dripping into her eyes, but she refused to slow down. She had learned from Omar how to pace herself, how to conserve energy, and how to take in small amounts of water at regular intervals to survive. Every lesson was a lifeline, and she clung to them like a child holding a parent's hand. As they walked, Omar occasionally pointed out small details she had never noticed before. The subtle change in the color of the sand that indicated moisture below, a cluster of rocks where shade might appear later in the day, or the way the wind shifted that could signal approaching storm. Amina was fascinated by how much he understood the desert. She realized that survival was not just about endurance, but about observation, knowledge, and respect for the land. "Why do you know so much about the desert?" she asked at one point, her curiosity breaking the quiet. Omar glanced at her with a gentle smile. "I have lived in it most of my life," he said. "It teaches you lessons if you are willing to listen, and it can be dangerous if you are not careful. I've learned to read it like a book." Amina nodded slowly, feeling a mix of admiration and relief. She realized that her own survival depended not only on her determination, but also on the guidance of someone who truly understood the desert. Omar had saved her life once, but now he was giving her something even more valuable, the skills and knowledge to survive the journey ahead. Hours passed, and the sun climbed higher in the sky. The sand became hotter, burning their feet through the thin soles of their shoes. Amina's throat began to feel dry again and her legs ached with every step. Omar noticed her struggle and slowed his pace, offering her water and encouraging words. "You are doing well," he said. "Just keep moving. We will find a small oasis soon, I promise." Amina took the water gratefully, feeling the cool liquid soothe her burning throat. She looked up at Omar, seeing the calm determination in his eyes, and felt a wave of gratitude. She had never imagined that a stranger could care so deeply, and she realized that this journey was not just about survival. It was about trust, partnership, and hope. As the afternoon sun reached its peak, the desert seemed to change. The wind picked up, carrying with it tiny grains of sand that stung their skin. The dunes became taller, steeper, and more difficult to cross. Amina stumbled several times, feeling her energy wane, but Omar was always there to steady her, offering a hand or a supportive word. "Almost there," he said, pointing to a faint green shimmer in the distance. "See that? Water and shade are just beyond those dunes." Amina's heart leapt at the sight. For the first time since she had entered the desert, she felt genuine hope. She pushed herself forward, step by step, her muscles screaming in protest, but her determination stronger than her fatigue. She thought of her family, her village, and the life she wanted to build once she survived this ordeal. Every thought became fuel for her body, giving her the strength to keep moving. Finally, they reached a small cluster of palm trees surrounding a hidden spring. The water sparkled in the sunlight, clear and inviting. Amina stumbled toward it, kneeling by the edge and drinking deeply, feeling the water revive her from the inside out. Her body trembled with relief and tears filled her eyes. She looked at Omar, who smiled softly, understanding without words. "You did it," he said. "You made it this far." Amina nodded, unable to speak for a moment. She felt a wave of gratitude and admiration for the man who had saved her life and guided her through the desert. She realized that without him, she might not have survived, and she vowed silently to remember every lesson he had taught her. After resting and drinking enough water to feel strong again, Omar suggested they continue their journey, but with caution. The desert could be unforgiving and dangers still lay ahead. Amina agreed, feeling more confident in her ability to face the challenges. She had learned that the desert was not just a place of despair. It was also a place of lessons, resilience, and unexpected hope. As they walked on, they encountered a sandstorm rising in the distance. The wind howled, carrying with it a blinding cloud of sand. Omar quickly guided Amina to a low dip between dunes, shielding her with his body as best as he could. The sandstorm was intense, stinging their skin and filling the air with dust, but they huddled together, relying on each other for protection. When the storm passed, Amina felt a new sense of strength within herself. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and danger, yet she was still standing, still moving forward. She realized that survival was not just about enduring physical pain, but also about mental resilience, the ability to push forward even when everything seemed impossible. As evening approached, they made camp near a rocky outcrop where they could rest safely. Omar showed Amina how to find small sources of shelter, how to set up a simple area to sleep, and how to conserve water for the night. Amina followed his instructions carefully, feeling a sense of pride in her growing independence. She was learning, adapting, and surviving, qualities she had never fully realized she possessed. That night, as they sat under the stars, Omar shared stories of other travelers he had helped and the lessons he had learned from the desert. Amina listened intently, feeling inspired and motivated. She realized that the desert, while harsh and unforgiving, had also given her something invaluable, a chance to discover her own strength, courage, and resilience. "You've come a long way," Omar said quietly, "not just across the desert but within yourself. You are stronger than you think." Amina smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. She knew he was right. She had faced death, exhaustion, and fear, yet she had survived. She had learned to trust, to persevere, and to keep hope alive even in the darkest moments. The desert had tested her in every way imaginable, but she had emerged stronger, more determined, and more capable than she had ever been. As they prepared to sleep, Amina felt a sense of gratitude and connection with Omar. She realized that their journey together was about more than just survival. It was about human kindness, trust, and the unspoken bond that forms when two people rely on each other in the face of adversity. She closed her eyes, feeling the cool desert night surround her, and drifted into a deep, restful sleep, ready to face whatever challenges the next day would bring. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a soft golden light over the dunes. Amina woke with a sense of determination stronger than ever. She had survived the harsh heat, the thirst, and the sandstorms, but deep inside, she knew that the desert still held challenges she had not yet faced. Today, they would need every ounce of courage and skill, for a critical obstacle awaited them ahead. A stretch of desert so vast and unforgiving that even Omar, experienced as he was, approached it with caution. After a light breakfast of bread and dried fruits, Omar reminded Amina to drink small sips of water frequently. "The desert is unpredictable," he said. "We need to stay alert. One mistake, one moment of carelessness, and it could cost us dearly." Amina nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. She understood that survival was no longer just about moving forward. It was about strategy, patience, and mental strength. With Omar leading the way, she began the journey across the open dunes, each step carefully measured. The sand was soft and unsteady, making every movement a challenge. The sun grew hotter with each passing hour, and the wind began to rise, carrying with it tiny grains of sand that stung their faces like needles. As they walked, Amina noticed something unusual on the horizon, dark clouds forming, moving quickly across the sky. Her heart sank. She had never seen a desert storm of this size before, and the sight filled her with unease. Omar noticed her tension and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's a storm," he said quietly, "and we have to move carefully. We can't outrun it, but we can survive it if we stay smart." They quickened their pace, heading toward a rocky ridge that Omar had spotted earlier. The storm approached rapidly, the wind howling with an intensity that made it difficult to hear each other. Sand whipped across their faces, and Amina's eyes watered, but she kept moving, focusing on Omar's steady presence beside her. She realized that this was a moment of true test, not just of endurance, but of courage, trust, and mental strength. By the time they reached the ridge, the storm had arrived in full force. The wind tore through the desert, lifting sand high into the air and reducing visibility to almost nothing. Amina clung to Omar, her heart pounding, her body trembling. She felt fear rising inside her, a fear that threatened to paralyze her, but Omar's calm guidance gave her a sense of security. "Stay low," he instructed. "Keep close to the rocks. Let the wind pass around us, not through us." They huddled together behind a large boulder, using it as a shield against the storm. The sand hit their skin like tiny pins, and the roar of the wind filled Amina's ears. She closed her eyes, letting Omar's presence anchor her, reminding herself that panic would only make the situation worse. With each passing minute, she focused on steadying her breath, keeping her body low and trusting the guidance of the man who had saved her life once already. Hours seemed to stretch like days as the storm raged around them. Amina's muscles ached, her skin burned from the sand, and her throat felt parched once again. She felt moments of despair creeping in, the fear of being trapped or lost threatening to overwhelm her. Yet, each time doubt rose, Omar spoke calmly, offering guidance and reassurance. "We are safe here," he said. "We will get through this, trust me." As the storm began to weaken, Amina opened her eyes and saw the world transformed. The dunes were now reshaped, the sand piled in new formations, and the sky above still heavy with dark clouds. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the occasional gust of wind. Amina felt a mixture of relief and awe. She had faced one of the desert's fiercest challenges and survived. But she knew that the journey was far from over. Omar helped her to her feet, steadying her as she regained her balance. "We must move forward," he said. "The longer we stay in one place, the more danger there is. We need to find water and shelter before nightfall." Amina nodded, drawing on the last reserves of her strength. She realized that survival in the desert required not only physical endurance but also mental resilience. Each challenge she faced tested her courage, her patience, and her determination to live. She felt a deep sense of respect for Omar, who had navigated her through danger not just with skill, but with kindness and understanding. As they continued walking, the landscape changed. The dunes became steeper, the sand hotter, and the sun more relentless. Amina's legs ached with every step, and her throat burned with thirst, but she pushed forward, drawing strength from her growing bond with Omar. She began to notice small signs of life around them, tiny desert plants, distant birds, and even small tracks in the sand that suggested animals nearby. These signs gave her hope, reminding her that life could exist even in such a harsh environment. Suddenly, they reached a section of the desert littered with sharp rocks and jagged stones. Omar guided Amina carefully, pointing out safe spots to step and warning her about loose rocks that could cause injury. Her muscles burned from the effort, but she followed his instructions diligently. She realized that trust was not just about relying on someone else. It was about listening, learning, and applying knowledge to survive. Midway through the rocky stretch, Amina stumbled on a hidden crevice, nearly twisting her ankle. She cried out in fear, but Omar was immediately there supporting her. "Careful," he said gently. "You're stronger than you think, but we must always be cautious." Amina took a deep breath, steadying herself. She realized that fear could be a tool as much as a challenge. It reminded her to stay alert, to focus on each step, and to respect the desert's power. With Omar's guidance, she continued, her confidence growing with every careful movement. By late afternoon, they finally reached a small valley, sheltered from the sun and wind. Amina collapsed onto the soft sand, exhausted but alive. Omar helped her sit and handed her water, which she drank greedily, feeling it revive her from the inside out. She looked around and saw a small patch of greenery nearby, a sign that water was close. Relief and hope surged through her, mingled with pride at how far she had come. "You've done well," Omar said, smiling. "The hardest part is behind us, but we still need to be careful. Night in the desert can be cold and dangerous." Amina nodded, feeling gratitude and respect for him. She realized that this journey had changed her, not just physically but emotionally and mentally. She had faced fear, pain, exhaustion, and uncertainty, and yet she had persevered. She understood now that survival was about more than just enduring. It was about courage, resilience, trust, and the willingness to learn from those who guide you. As the sun began to set, Omar helped her find a safe place to rest. They set up a small camp, using rocks and cloth to create shelter from the desert chill. Amina felt a mix of relief and accomplishment as she prepared to sleep. She had faced the desert's most dangerous challenges and had survived, not just because of Omar's guidance, but because of her own growing strength and determination. That night, under the blanket of stars, Amina reflected on everything she had endured. The desert had tested her in every way imaginable, but it had also taught her valuable lessons about courage, trust, and the power of human kindness. She realized that her journey was not just about reaching safety. It was about discovering her own strength and resilience, and understanding that even in the harshest circumstances, hope and trust could survive. Omar sat beside her quietly, watching the stars. "You've changed," he said softly. "You're stronger now, not just in body but in spirit." Amina smiled faintly, feeling warmth in her chest. She knew he was right. She had faced fear, exhaustion, and danger, yet she had survived. She had learned to trust, to persevere, and to keep hope alive even in the darkest moments. The desert had tested her, but she had emerged stronger, more determined, and more capable than she had ever been. As she closed her eyes, the cool desert night surrounding her, Amina felt a deep sense of gratitude. She was not alone. She had someone who believed in her, guided her, and helped her survive. And in that quiet moment, she realized that her fate had truly begun to change, not because the desert had grown easier, but because she had grown stronger, braver, and more capable than she had ever imagined. The next morning, the desert was calm. The sun rose slowly, spreading soft golden light across the dunes and casting long, gentle shadows. Amina awoke feeling a sense of quiet strength that she had never felt before. She stretched her stiff muscles, noting the aches from the past days, but inside her, something had shifted. She realized that surviving the desert was no longer just about her body. It was about her mind, her heart, and the courage she had discovered within herself. Omar was already awake, preparing their small camp for the day. He moved with a practiced ease, gathering supplies, checking their water, and scanning the horizon for potential dangers. Amina watched him quietly, a sense of gratitude filling her chest. He had guided her through the worst of the desert, shared his knowledge, and shown her kindness and patience when she had felt hopeless. She knew that without him, she might not have made it this far. After a simple breakfast of bread and dried fruits, they packed their camp and began walking once again. The path ahead was still long, but the desert seemed less threatening now. Amina had learned to move with purpose, to pace herself, and to read the signs of the land. Each step felt more confident, and the fear that had once overwhelmed her had been replaced with determination and hope. As they walked, Amina reflected on the journey she had undertaken. She remembered the first day, when she had been exhausted, dehydrated, and terrified. She remembered the moment she had seen Omar approaching, the relief and hope that had flooded her heart. She remembered the sandstorms, the rocky paths, the fear and exhaustion, and how she had faced each challenge with Omar's guidance and her own growing strength. Every memory was a reminder of how far she had come. The desert, vast and silent, seemed to acknowledge her perseverance. Tiny signs of life appeared more frequently, small shrubs, tracks of desert animals, and even distant birds gliding above. Each of these signs gave her hope and motivation. She realized that life could endure in the harshest conditions, just as she had endured, and that she too could emerge stronger and wiser from this experience. By midday, the sun was high and the heat intense, but Amina had learned to manage it. She moved with steady steps, taking small sips of water, resting in the occasional shade, and listening carefully to Omar's advice. His calm presence continued to guide her, but she also felt a growing sense of independence. She could now anticipate the dangers, choose safe paths, and make decisions that would aid their journey. She realized that she was no longer just surviving, she was learning to thrive, even in the desert. As they approached a distant ridge, Amina spotted something that made her heart leap. In the distance, there appeared to be a small settlement, a cluster of buildings that promised water, food, and shelter. Her pace quickened slightly, fueled by excitement and relief. Omar noticed the change in her steps and gave a small smile. "We're almost there," he said. "Stay steady. We're not out of the desert yet, but help is very close." The closer they got, the more signs of life became visible. Birds flew above, plants grew thicker, and the sand began to give way to small patches of grass. Amina felt a wave of relief and joy she had never experienced in the past days. She realized that the desert, with all its trials, had led her here, to safety, to hope, and to a new beginning. Finally, they reached the settlement. People were going about their daily tasks, tending to animals, fetching water, and working under the sun. Amina felt a mixture of awe and gratitude as she stepped onto firmer ground, leaving behind the endless sand dunes that had tested her so severely. She looked at Omar, her eyes filled with thanks. "We made it," she whispered, barely able to contain her emotion. Omar nodded, his expression calm yet warm. "You made it," he corrected gently. "I guided you, but you survived this desert because of your own strength and courage." Amina realized the truth in his words. She had relied on him, yes, but it was her determination, resilience, and trust that had carried her through. She felt a deep sense of pride, understanding that survival was not just about enduring hardship. It was about learning, growing, and believing in oneself, even when circumstances seemed impossible. The people in the settlement welcomed them kindly, offering water, food, and rest. Amina drank deeply, feeling her body and spirit revive with each sip. She ate with gratitude, savoring every bite, and finally allowed herself to rest without fear. For the first time in days, she felt safe, cared for, and truly alive. As the evening approached, Amina sat quietly, reflecting on the journey she had undertaken. She thought of her family back home, the life she had left behind, and the experiences that had transformed her. She realized that the desert, harsh as it had been, had taught her invaluable lessons. Courage in the face of fear, patience in times of struggle, trust in those who offer help, and the incredible strength that can emerge from adversity. Omar sat beside her, silently watching the sunset. "You've changed," he said softly. "You're not the same person who walked into this desert days ago. You've grown stronger, wiser, and braver. The desert has tested you, and you've emerged victorious." Amina smiled faintly, feeling warmth in her chest. She knew he was right. She had faced the impossible, survived the harshest conditions, and discovered a strength she had never known existed within her. The desert had been a teacher, harsh and unrelenting, but its lessons had been invaluable. As night fell, the settlement glowed with soft lights from small fires and lamps. Amina lay down to rest, feeling the cool night air on her skin and the comforting presence of Omar nearby. She realized that her journey through the desert was more than just a struggle for survival. It was a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and hope. She had faced death, fear, and uncertainty, and yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and full of gratitude. In the following days, Amina began to rebuild her life. She connected with the people in the settlement, sharing her story and learning from theirs. She helped with small tasks, contributed where she could, and gradually regained her strength. Each day, she felt more empowered, more capable, and more certain that she could face any challenge that life might present. Omar remained by her side for much of this time, guiding her when needed, but also allowing her independence to flourish. Their bond had grown deeper, founded on trust, respect, and shared experiences. Amina realized that their encounter had not just saved her life. It had taught her the value of human connection, kindness, and the power of support in the most desperate circumstances. Eventually, Amina made the decision to continue her journey beyond the settlement, but now with confidence, knowledge, and courage she had never possessed before. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she also knew that she was capable of facing them. The desert had tested her limits, pushed her to the edge, and reshaped her into someone stronger, braver, and wiser. As she prepared to leave the settlement, she looked at Omar with gratitude and respect. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "You changed my fate." "I would not be here without you," Omar smiled gently. "You changed your own fate," he said. "I only helped you see the way. The strength was always within you." Amina nodded, understanding the truth in his words. She had faced the desert, survived its trials, and discovered a resilience she had never known existed. She felt a deep sense of pride and empowerment. She knew that no matter what lay ahead, she could face it with courage, determination, and hope. As she walked toward the horizon, leaving the settlement behind, Amina felt a sense of freedom and possibility. The desert, which had once seemed endless and merciless, was now a symbol of her strength, resilience, and ability to overcome the most difficult challenges. She carried with her not only memories of struggle, but also lessons of courage, trust, and the power of human connection. And in that moment, as the sun set and painted the sky in hues of orange and gold, Amina realized something profound. Life had tested her, pushed her to her limits, and yet it had also given her the chance to rise, to survive, and to embrace a future filled with hope, strength, and endless possibilities.